FM News Talk 97.1.
On-demand audio.
Still, a lot of the president's advisors admit there are no quick fixes, and today they really pushed back against that criticism that it's the president's fault. As President Obama today cheered passage of the payroll tax cut, he acknowledged the extra $40 in an average family's paycheck may now be needed to help cushion the blow of higher gas prices.
That $40 helps to pay the rent, the groceries, the rising cost of gas, which is on a lot of people's minds right now.
Republican rival Newt Gingrich today said Mr. Obama was to blame for the rising cost, and then he made this campaign trail pledge.
I really would change things pretty dramatically. $2.50 a gallon is not a radical idea. It was $1.13 on average the 4 years I was Speaker. It was $1.89 when Barack Obama was sworn in.
That kind of promise prompted this from White House spokesman Jay Carney.
This kind of situation that comes periodically because of a rise in the price of oil globally often results in magic solutions being put forward by politicians who may or may not know what they're talking about.
Is the rise in gas prices the president's fault?
Look, the rise in gas prices is clearly the effect of a variety of factors on the global price of oil. They include unrest in certain regions of the world. They include growth in areas like China and India.
Yeah. Do you remember? I find this absolutely fascinating. And I remember this. I mean, granted, I was, in high school and college during this time, when Bush was president. All the media blamed him for the high gas prices. You all remember this. It's because you had you had the oil guy and the Halliburton guy in office. You all remember this. I mean, the headlines from every major media outlet blamed Bush, and the gas prices were lower than what they're projected to be right now. Joining us on the line is Jack Gerard. He's head of API, the American Petroleum Institute. And Jack, I'm sure that you are just as surprised as I am that the media suddenly cares about high gas prices when they ignored all of the factors that contributed to those increase in gas prices. And all of a sudden now it's not the president's fault when that's been the standard measure for the past several presidents.
Well, I've always been amazed, Dana, and thanks for having me on today. But you hear the talk now, and you hear the president, some of his chief advisors saying, well, there's no short-term fix. There's no silver bullet. But 3 years ago, when we were telling everybody, let's go produce domestic oil and natural gas, we won't have these problems. Well, now we're having these problems yet again, and Jay Carney at the White House is absolutely right. It's due to the cost of crude on a global basis. However, the one variable we have control over in the price of crude is domestic supply. And the more domestic supply we bring to the marketplace, the downward pressure it will put on the crude price and thus reduce the cost of gasoline. So now that we don't have silver bullets, well, that's a lame excuse for a failed policy over the past 3 years. We got to get the energy policy right. It has to begin today. It should have begun some time ago. But if we get it right, we won't be subject to these wild gyrations and swings because we'll take our energy future in our own hands and take control of our future. That's what we've got to do.
And one of the things, and I completely agree, by the way, the domestic, these foreign variables would not mean anything if we were self-sustaining with this. I mean, we have the ability, but the president, since 2008 and before, he's been saying, oh, well, even if we did domestic drilling, we'd only get a couple percentage points of the world's oil reserves. And it's very interesting math that they use, Jack. When you hear things like that, how do you respond to that?
Well, there's a couple things, Dana. First of all, they love to use this technical term called recoverable reserves. And what that essentially is a technical term we use in industry that points out the proven reserves that you've already drilled and demonstrated are there. And they try to suggest there's very limited resource in the United States. Nothing's further from the truth. The Congressional Research Service, which advises Congress, is nonpartisan. It's not of a political party. Released a report about 4 months ago pointing out that the United States is the most energy-rich nation in the world, bar none. We have more energy and potential oil here with our oil shale oil, gas, than Libya, Iran, Iraq, Kuwait combined.
Oh, wow.
We have more than anybody else. The problem is we don't have the political will, or I might add the courage, to step forward and devise an energy policy by Americans for Americans that will benefit Americans. There's one key fact that studies recently concluded that your listeners should know about. If we were allowed to produce U.S. oil and natural gas, coupled with Canadian imports from the oil sands, which will require the approval of the Keystone XL pipeline, which the president refused to approve, coupled with what we will produce in this country with renewables, we could be energy self-sufficient right here in North America in 12 years.
Wow.
So 12 years from now, if we got off the dime, if we quit playing this finger-pointing game about, well, gee, we can't control the price of oil coming out of the Middle East, the Keystone XL pipeline would have brought to the United States half of what we import today from the Middle East. Every dollar we spend in Canada to produce that oil and bring it here, 90 cents of that dollar returns to the United States in the form of a purchase of goods and services. Every dollar we spend in the Middle East, we get 33 cents back. Now, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure this stuff out. If we were clear and capable of overcoming the very small, shrill group of critics who don't want any oil and gas production in this country, and had political courage to step forward and said, you know what, we can make ourselves energy secure. We can become less dependent on other forms around the world, and it's a huge job creator. It generates billions of dollars in revenue to governments, both federal and state, and it makes us less reliant. You know, when Iran starts talking about creating problems in the Straits of Hormuz, we'd be far less concerned about that outside of, international diplomatic concerns.
Yeah.
Because we wouldn't be relying on these people for our energy.
Exactly.
But we need a leader. We got to have somebody step up and talk about the facts and quit playing politics with energy and the blame game. You watch what will happen now, and it's already starting to happen. Let's go blame the industry for this.
Yes. And Jay Carney he just spoke the other day saying that he blames Republicans over the the people who have been wanting and pushing for the Keystone pipeline. The administration just blamed for the inability to get it done, which I find fascinating.
Yeah, can you imagine the Keystone debate? Here's a pipeline. It's a $7 billion investment, 1,700 miles long. And the first excuse was, well, it really doesn't create that many jobs. Well, I thought every job was a good job in the current economic environment with 8% unemployment. But secondarily, the president said, well, the Republicans passed a provision. Let me correct that. There were 42 Democrats that supported for the provision. So it's a bipartisan Congress saying we ought to approve the Keystone XL pipeline. But the president's reaction to that provision in law was, well, you didn't give me enough time. Remember when you were a kid in the schoolyard? You didn't like the way the game was going. You picked up your ball and you went home. That's what happened. Unfortunately, it's killing American jobs. It's hurting our ability to be energy independent. And then people scratch their heads when they see the price of energy go through the ceiling. It's not that hard. We need a leader with some political courage that'll talk about an energy policy. That's how we get to where we need to be today.
Now, the president is expected to make an address about the higher gas prices, and I'm not quite sure what to expect, because this is the same man who has supported all of the EPA regulations, which have killed our ability to do anything domestically. I'm not quite sure, Jack, what he, in the context that he's built for himself, what he can actually say in his address on Thursday that's really going to target or provide any real solutions for this. Is there anything that you're expecting?
Well, let me tell you what he will say, Dana, and I can predict this with my eyes closed and half asleep right now because he's been talking about it for 3 and 4 years. The first thing he's going to tell the American public, he's going to say, oil production is up in the United States. And as a matter of fact, that's true. However, that's in spite of his policies and not because of his policies. Oil production in the United States is up today because of places like North Dakota. North Dakota is the 4th largest producer of oil. The unemployment rate in North Dakota is 3% because of all the jobs the oil and gas industry's created. The average oil and gas job in North Dakota is $90,000.
Wow.
That's twice what the average wage is in the state of North Dakota, about $45,000. We have high school graduates in North Dakota today working in the oil and gas business, making twice as much as their parents have ever made. Now, the reason that's so important, North Dakota production's up considerably. Why? Because it's on private and state land. If you take that same land in places like the Rocky Mountains where the president has control over them, leases are down 70%. You take that same land in the Outer Continental Shelf in the Gulf of Mexico where the president has a say, production is down 15%. So the president will try to take credit for oil production in the United States. Let me tell you, we've been investing billions of dollars. We've been putting thousands of people back to work with great, well-paying jobs in spite of the president's policy, not because of him. So the first thing he'll say is, well, production's really up. Well, it has nothing to do with the president or his administration. The second thing he'll try to do is he'll try to deflect blame, and he'll say, well, this is all because of big oil. They make too much money, and you'll hear all this nonsense about profits, etc. The oil and natural gas industry today in the United States receives 0 subsidies. Nothing. Not one subsidy. What we get in the tax code are the same thing every other businesses get. It's cost of recovery deductions. So, for example, what the president's proposed is to repeal all the tax code provisions that apply to the oil and gas industry, where all we're doing is recouping our costs for developing energy. We don't get subsidies. But by repealing that, the president's going to put another $86 billion tax bill on us. We happen to be the industry that pays the highest effective tax rate in the United States, 41%, compared to 26% for the average Standard & Poor's industrials.
Man.
We contribute $86 million a day to the federal treasury. So the president's policy, first he's going to say production's up. The second thing he's going to say, I'm going to blame big oil, so I'm going to go get all their tax provisions. And what that does is it discourages our investment in the United States because it raises the cost of producing energy in the United States.
Man.
So it's a challenge for us, but I'll predict, and I almost guarantee you, Dana, that's exactly what he's going to say to try to shift the blame elsewhere.
Well, and I'm so glad, Jack, that we have people like you out there fighting against these false narratives about this coming from the White House. We so appreciate your work and your perspective on this. It's invaluable, Jack. Thank you.
Thank you, Dana. Always good to talk to you.
You too. Take care.